Welcome to the Craftsman Founder Podcast, hosted by Lucas Carlson. Every week, we talk to founders, entrepreneurs, and those who've made a craft out of creating companies and enterprises. Listen every week to get ideas for starting, promoting, and growing your business. There are no shortcuts, just good old-fashioned hard work and craft. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's interview.
Hello, this is Lucas Carlson.
And this is Eliot Peper.
And this is the Craftsman Founder Podcast. Now, this week, I don't have a special guest nearly as special as our co-host, Eliot Peper, because this week we're talking about Eliot's brand new book, Uncommon Stock Exit Strategy. Now, this is the finale. Wow, there it is.
Yeah, that's the proof.
This is the finale of the trilogy, the Uncommon Stock Trilogy, and we've talked about the other books on this show, and so I'm very excited to have Eliot on to talk about this this final book. Eliot, when does it come out?
It launches on July 29th, which is a Wednesday. So awesome. I think that this may be published that day, right?
We're probably going to be, so you can pre-order it right now, and you'll get it within a week if you're early, and you might just be able to pick it up instantly. And so, Eliot, congratulations!
Thank you, Lucas.
That's really impressive. 3 novels in such a short period of time. So, looking at the arc, thinking of the Uncommon Trilogy as just one big story, what kind of surprised you about writing this? Actually, before we get into that, what is the arc? What's the, if you could distill it down to an elevator pitch, what's the arc?
So the Uncommon series is a tech startup thriller story. So it's about 2 college students who drop out to start a software company, and their software is sort of like spell check for financial fraud. So it's a pattern recognition algorithm that picks out, it goes through financial data and picks out where there might be inconsistencies. And as they start their company and begin to build it, they actually get drawn into an international money laundering conspiracy, and it sort of goes downhill from there.
Awesome. And from my reading experience, it gets more and more exciting through all books. I think the 3rd book is the most exciting, most action-packed of all the books. I think they all are really good books. I think the first one has tons of excellent advice that if you're an entrepreneur, I think reading that first one, it's just filled with great nuggets. Throughout all 3 you get nuggets, but I think the first one packs them in. And the 3rd book, by that time, you pack in the action. So it's kind of a little for everyone. So did anything surprise you? Now, you wrote these books not knowing, you didn't plan in advance how they were going to end and how the series was going to end. So what kind of was that like?
It was interesting. So the first book, the first thing I wrote, and I recently rediscovered this, so that's actually a pretty cool question. The first thing I wrote was the dust jacket copy for book 1, which is, the little teaser trailer of the book that you read on the back of it. So like the summary of the story, more or less, or at least the teaser for the story. And what I found pretty incredible is that I wrote, it's 3 or 5 sentences, and I wrote that before starting any of the books and without doing any outlining at all. And it remains accurate to this day, which I find like mind-boggling. I definitely thought it would have completely changed, but it was sort of interesting that still works today. But my creative process for writing the books, I literally sat down and opened up a blank Word document and started typing. And I just wrote a couple chapters as almost like a sample, and then decided to keep going and went on from there. And so I didn't outline. I didn't have a map. I certainly didn't know how the trilogy was going to conclude. I didn't even have a plan for book 1, let alone the whole arc. And so it really evolved more organically as I was writing it. I got to know the characters better. characters are a lot like people. If when you meet someone for the first time, you might get a first impression, but you don't necessarily know them that well. And so as I got to know the characters better through writing them, that really started to drive the story a little bit more. And I'd be like, wait a minute, so what would they actually think in this situation? What would they do? How would they react? And that ended up driving the story more. I mean, one thing that I knew and that I hopefully have pulled off is that with any trilogy where it's one narrative arc, meaning that there's like Star Wars, right? It's like, the first movie, but then it all builds up to the last movie. Basically, at every episode, in this case, at every book, the stakes need to raise, right? So you need to raise the stakes, and things sort of get more and more exciting. And that's particularly true in the thriller genre. So that's one of the things I was working with, I guess looking back with the trilogy as a whole.
Awesome. Can we see the book cover again for the third book?
Yeah. So that actually, I should, if you give me a minute, I can actually show you some of the other book covers.
Yeah, let's do that. Because one of the things I was going to ask is, how'd you get these book covers? They're really cool book covers, and we'll see all three of them.
Okay. Yeah, just give me one
sec.
Sure,
I can edit this out too.
Okay, so there's actually some fun stories behind these covers. So here's book one, and if you're just listening to the podcast, it's sort of there's sort of like leaves in the background, some burning paperwork, and some other props.
Yeah, if you're listening to the podcast, just go to Amazon.com and type Uncommon Stock and press buy. And then that's the best way you can see it up close in action.
Yeah, exactly. That is the best way. So here's book two. It's called Power Play.
That one's my favorite.
So you want to describe it then?
Yeah, I love it because it's got a Zen kind of feel to it. There's a wooden desk. There's a very nice macchiato, which is one of my favorite coffees, with some coffee art in it, and then there's this pistol. It's a gun on a book, and the pistol. It's like, did you have a professional photographer figure out to put these things together, or was this like?
I believe me, I will give you the full background.
It's so cool.
Yeah, so this is really fun. So and I don't know if I can physically do this, but now you can sort of see them all together, right? A little bit. So you can see that a lot. There's a lot of matching stuff here, right?
Yeah.
So for those listening, it's there's sort of the themes. You can see different colors and typography that matches, but also just the way the covers are. They're all still life photographs. And as some folks know, covers can actually be a pretty expensive part of producing a book.
Yes.
And even many of the big publishers like Random House, not for all of their books, but for many of their books, they use stock photography. So they'll go on one of the big online libraries for stock photos and then choose a photo and then more or less doctor it to create the photo for the books. But we actually did it all original. So Dane McDonald, who is the CEO at FG Press, who's the publisher for the first two books, also happens to be basically a very highly skilled amateur photographer. And so he did all of these photos.
That's crazy.
And the shoots were pretty interesting. So for the first book, you can see that there's a knife, there's these burning papers and leaves. And so and the books take place in Boulder, Colorado, and that's also where Dane lives and where FG Press is based. And so for this shot, they went out in the streets of Boulder, found a spot that had this nice background on it with the leaves. It was fall, obviously. And this paperwork is actually term sheets. They're actually real term sheets made out correctly to the fictional company in the book. From Foundry Group, which is a big venture firm based in Boulder. And so they were on the sidewalk and they set up this photo shoot and then started burning paper on the sidewalk, right? So everybody's walking around and asking what they're doing and, really sort of interesting. And for the second book, they had another issue because, as you can see, there's a gun.
Yep.
And, the book is about a tech startup. Many first-time entrepreneurs, if you read Lucas's upcoming book, The Term Sheet, you'll find out as well we spent a lot of time in coffee shops. And so there are scenes in the book at Boulder coffee shops. And so we were like, great, we can actually do the shoot at Boulder coffee shops. But when Dane went out and tried to find a shop to host the shoot, none of them would allow a gun in their coffee shop, right? Which is understandable. And so then they had the reverse problem of, if they're going to set up this photo shoot at the FG Press office, they need that macchiato to have the latte art intact on top. Yeah. And so they had to find sort of the closest coffee shop and run the macchiato back like in its ceramic cup rather than a to-go cup. And like they have this is actually not a desk. It's planks that are set up on the floor to look like a desk. And it's really interesting. And for the last one, this is interesting too. So at first we were planning to have this done against a snow background. So you could have bright red blood against snow in the mountains in Boulder. And Dane went out with Kevin, who's my designer, and they spent a whole day in the mountains, like trekking through like frozen streams, trying to get a good background shot. And they had cow blood that they had gotten, I think, from Whole Foods, right, to use as the blood. But they couldn't get a good shot, in part just because of the surroundings, but also because the blood congealed because it was so cold. They're up in the mountains, it's snowing, right? Yeah. And so we did a reshoot, and I actually think the cover came out fantastic. And this book in the background is Venture Deals by Brad Feld, which is a good one. And this is an actual SEC S1 statement. Nice. So this is the paperwork you file when you're going to take your company public. Yep. And it's made out correctly with all the fictional company's information and stuff like that. So we had a lot of fun with the covers.
That's so cool.
And that's how we ended up getting them done. So I'm really pleased with the result. It's fun to see them all together.
That's so cool. So what's next for you? Are you working on anything new?
Yeah, I am. So I just started writing my next novel, which is a new story with new characters. Like as you can probably attest, I like writing about what I'm enthusiastic about. So it's also going to involve new technology and some entrepreneurial themes. It won't be as explicitly following the startup life cycle as this series was, but I'm really excited about it. It's a lot of fun.
Cool.
Yeah. One thing that I found sort of interesting in writing these stories, and we've talked before about the previous two books and about sort of my initial idea behind them was, wouldn't it be cool if people who had never started their own company before were given a window into the mind of an entrepreneur, right? Yes. And fiction sort of has a special way to do that, in that you're really invited into someone's life with their doubts intact, right? Rather than getting their sort of like lessons learned after the fact. And so that's been really fun. It's been really fun to play with that and to really explore how the characters have dealt with that, all the way now from Garage through IPO, which is dealt with in the last book. And I had never been through an IPO myself, so I actually interviewed a number of entrepreneurs who had taken companies public multiple times in order to inform the story, make sure that everything was real, right? Felt real. But the other thing that I found interesting, and this is something I was not expecting writing the trilogy, and that I'm now appreciating coming out of it, is actually what the theme of what the company does in the book and how important that is. So in the book, as I said, it's sort of like the company's called Mosaic, and they have this financial fraud detection software suite. And so they work with banks, and they're able to sort of analyze all of the bank software and pull out where there might be potential issues, whether it's fraud or anything else. And I learned a lot actually trying to get that idea right. So I talked to friends who were special agents, federal special agents, people at the Treasury, people at Homeland Security, people at private banks that are in charge of detecting money laundering, and it was actually sort of terrifying Very recently, there's been all this new information that's come out about the Office of Personnel Management hack, right? So this massive hack where 22 million, the background files on 22 million Americans, many of whom are high-level people within the CIA and Department of Defense, were hacked by state-sponsored Chinese hackers. And at the same time, there are every year our financial institutions lose hundreds of millions of dollars to fraud and to actual hacks. This is in the context globally that the United Nations estimates there's literally $2 trillion a year in profits to organized crime.
Wow.
And that 15 to 20% of global GDP is black market money.
Wow.
So when you think about the size of that, right? like that's one in every $5 spent. That's crazy, right? And the reason why that persists is because there are so many holes in the institutions we've built, and particularly on the technical side. So, everybody sort of like the way that the OPM hack and many of these are reported in the media is that, oh, look at this, some brilliant hacker, had this very devious scheme and executed it, and like, wow, they must be so smart. How could you even think to defend against them, right? To a certain extent, that has some validity. Obviously, there are many smart, bad actors out there in the world. But the thing that we also don't tend to focus on is that when you look at OPM and when you look at our banking system, basically most of the people running their entire internal operations don't understand how computers work. and that's the hard part. So you have, and these are big institutions, so they've been using computers since the 60s. And often the code that they're running, first of all, it's enormous. It's like Mount Everests of code because there's so much layered on top of each other. Yep. But the way that they've fixed problems in the past is by putting Band-Aid after Band-Aid on. And that each of those holes is a golden ticket to a potential hacker, right? And when you don't even have the source code for parts of your system anymore, it's just crazy, right? And so these are our most trusted institutions. This is our federal government, the large international banks, and they're the ones that are honestly like sort of most in danger here because they have these huge systems. And I think it's something that I certainly didn't understand the scope of before doing the research for these novels, and something that I feel like most of my friends don't like. We know hacking's bad, right?
Yeah.
But really understanding how vulnerable we've made ourselves is something that really deserves a lot of thought. And honestly, it's something that your new book too, the term sheet, deals with too. And so that has been very thought provoking for me personally. Just the scope of these issues, and there's things that aren't reported on. Especially with money laundering. All those $2 trillion in profits, they're being managed. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
But it's not as sexy to have like a hedge fund get busted.
Yep.
Right. As having like a picture with mounds of cocaine and AK-47s. Right. But those are the people. Those hedge funds for bad actors they're the ones enabling this whole scheme to continue. So anyway.
Well, if anybody's listening to this. Read the Uncommon Stock Trilogy and then just start the company.
Yeah, exactly. Please do.
And you too can fast track to an IPO.
Exactly. So yeah, if any of you guys want to start Mosaic, I'll be your first customer.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, and really looking forward. Everybody listening, if you haven't purchased it already, now's the time. Now you can get all 3 books. You don't have to wait any longer. If you don't like to read trilogies because you don't want to wait for the books to come out, now's the time to buy all 3 and get them all in a package.
Great. Well, Lucas, thanks again for having me on. It's always a pleasure to do these podcasts with you.
Thank you, Eliot.
And we'll talk soon.
Thanks for listening to the Craftsman Founder Podcast with Lucas Carlson. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll pass along our web address, craftsmanfounder.com, to your friends and colleagues. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts. This has been a Craftsman Founder production. Join us next time for another edition of the Craftsman Founder Podcast.